and welcome to the podcast that loves to see their tallest centre-back marked by a 5'7" centre mid. It's the big man up top.
It certainly is. Hey Joe, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ed. That was a reference to Dan Burn, who, did you know, only has 9 fingers.
Sorry, what?
Did you know this?
No.
I was Googling how tall he is.
Right.
He's 1.98 m. Don't know what that is in feet.
Quite high.
Quite high.
Yeah.
And it said why Dan Burn only has 9 fingers.
Oh
And I
my
looked
gosh.
for a picture, and he does. He's missing his 4th finger on his right hand.
Do we know why?
He was wearing a ring and he tried to climb a fence.
Oh my goodness.
This was on quite a questionable news site, so is it true? Is it not? Anyway, how are you, Ed?
Well, I'm blown away by that news. I'm doing really good, thank you, Joe. Yes. Obviously, we've got lots to chat about today. Of course, the big thing is Liverpool's season falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was saying to you earlier, I don't think we've ever covered the Carabao Cup on this podcast, so I see no reason why we would start now.
No, we are going to...
Because it's very much finished now. Shall we just move on to
the
Premier League? Manchester City 2,
We are going to
right?
look at the Carabao Cup in depth today, along with looking at Man United Stadium, Joe, because this news came out just after we recorded the last
it was
episode,
so annoying.
wasn't it?
I was driving home and then I saw some messages popping up talking about this interview, and I thought, we've really missed a trick here.
Yeah, but it's great because it just means we get to cover it this week, and also we're going to look at Thomas Tuchel's first England squad, aren't we?
Yes, always big in the news cycle, isn't it? The first squad of a manager.
You start to hear about the philosophy and all that sort of stuff.
What's he going for?
What's he going for? Absolutely. But first of all, Bible Ballers, Joe.
Let's do it.
We've got a little bit of a treat today. So we have a message from Anthony, from producer Anthony, all about Bible Ballers. Should we have a listen?
Let's hear it.
Hello, producer Anthony here. I am interrupting your regularly scheduled Bible Ballers quiz because we have had a great email from Paul, the Man City supporter. He has submitted a question, a little brain teaser for both Joe and Ed.
Wow.
Now, this one is a little bit tough, so I've decided that we're going to change up the rules slightly. For this week only, if you get the name of the player correct, you will get 2 points.
Ooh.
But if you can only guess the book of the Bible, you will still get a point.
I really need these 2 points.
On to the question. Which England under-20 international, who is also eligible to play for Jamaica and currently plays on loan in League One, has not one but 2 books of the Bible in their full name?
Oh, gosh.
That's a tough one.
That's very hard.
I'm interested by this. There's 2 books of the Bible in their name.
I've got a list of the books of the Bible, which we have allowed in the past.
Yeah.
We can rule out Ruth, I think.
Can we? Yeah. Let's go with the ruling out Ruth.
I think we're going to just end up putting 2 Bible books together and hoping for the best.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. We'll come back to it. Maybe we can have another listen to it later on.
That would be nice.
This sounds like a tough one, though,
really
doesn't it,
hard.
Joe?
Yeah, okay.
Joe, let's start off with the big news. I think, probably, let's be honest.
2 Nottingham Forest 4.
No, it's the biggest news of the season so
biggest news
far.
of the season, Arsenal scraping a win?
No, it's the biggest news of the season so far. It was Newcastle ending a 70-year domestic trophy drought by beating Liverpool 2-1 at Wembley in the Carabao Cup final. Joe, let's just go with your first initial thoughts. How are you feeling?
I'm sure when Newcastle were pumped with all this Saudi Arabian money that the owners were aiming for this Carabao Cup win 3 years into their ownership.
They've got to start somewhere.
No, Newcastle were great. Let's start with that.
They were,
I think you have to give them credit. They just wanted it. It's such a cliche in football, but they just really wanted this win. They were desperate for it. And they turned up. I thought their midfield was excellent. I thought Joel Linton was fantastic. As annoying as it is seeing him celebrate every throw-in he's won, I think he was excellent.
You're not bitter at all.
Do you want some of these sour grapes?
No, I think you're right. You could just tell they were first to every ball. They were winning the second ball all the time. Even though Liverpool had a lot of possession, they struggled because they were closing down so quickly. They just looked that extra bit more on it.
I think this is something you've seen from Newcastle against big teams. They know how to mark players really well. That sounds quite simple, but they're so quick to go to the ball. The only times Liverpool looked good is when they played out from the back and they were a bit braver on the ball. but so often throughout the match they'd try and Newcastle would be on them like a flash. I think something that's not really been spoken about with this game is Alexander Isak's finish. I think that was a fantastic goal.
It was. And actually, like, let's have a look at the two Newcastle goals. Dan Burns' goal, first of all.
Yeah.
Leapt like a salmon, didn't he? And as
really
we've already
good
discussed, he's a tall guy.
He's really good header. I think this is the story of the game for me. I think he's a local boy. He's been around loads of clubs, played at Brighton for quite a while, and finally got his move to Newcastle. And to score the goal that starts off this win.
Had his England call up this week?
He did. He's had such a good week, and it's clear they'd been working on it. Eddie Howe actually said that they'd been working on set pieces for 2 weeks in the lead up to this final. And they actually played Liverpool a few weeks ago, and he said, I don't know how true this is, but he was like, for that game, we didn't want to let on what we were planning for the final. And clearly what they were planning was, let's get these corners into Dan Burn, and it worked.
And speaking of leaping like a salmon, I thought Jacob Murphy for the second goal, the assist to get up there, nod it back down for Isak, just again showed real desire. Even jumping, they just showed like they had the extra inch, and just looked like they were first to get to the ball. But yeah, like you say, great finish by Isak as well.
Really, I think that goal is brilliant. I think it's a really underrated goal, like you say, the assist as well. But just the quick thinking to put that in the corner. It's quite a difficult finish, and he just made it look so easy. And I think that epitomises Newcastle this season. I think Jacob Murphy, he's not necessarily the best player in the Premier League, but he works hard and did really well to create that chance for him.
I happened to watch this game in a bar with some friends, and there were a few Newcastle supporters amongst us. They were getting stressed out. Even at 2-0 up, 10 minutes to go, I'm thinking, like, come on, you're dominating the game. Why are you worried? They were stressed.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Liverpool were not good in this game, but it felt like if Liverpool get one, they probably get another. You
had a couple of amazing saves by both goalkeepers towards the end to keep it at 2-0. I think it could have swayed there.
I think there was that chance by Curtis Jones. I think he changed the game for me for Liverpool going forward. I think he's really good box to box. He had that chance where he started the move himself. One of the only times Liverpool actually looked like they put a move together. And he had that chance that Nick Pope made a really good save. And I think if that had gone in, I think the game would have been different.
Kelleher also made a fantastic save to keep it at 2-0
really
from Isak
important
later
save, because if that goes 3-0, the game's completely dead.
Let's look at the bad side of Liverpool. This has not been a great week for them.
No.
Obviously issues in the Champions League, but they just didn't look up for this, and it's such a shame because they do feel like they have the potential to be world beaters, and I know it's always difficult to win the quadruple or whatever it is, but they're going to be in a really tough place now, and they've got to pick themselves back up again.
Yeah, and I think actually the international breaks come at a really good time for Liverpool. It's been a bad week, and I actually don't think they played that badly against PSG. Arne Slot said it's the best performance he's seen from his team, which managers often do this after a loss. They say, actually, we played really well. But they played well, they just couldn't finish. The big thing for this game for me was desire, and I think, sadly, they just didn't look up for it. I think this is where you see a difference between Slot and Klopp, because I think if Klopp was manager yesterday, they're well up for it. And I think they're just tired. I think Slot's picking a very similar lineup every week. You've got players like Elliott, you saw Chiesa come on yesterday, really try, and Curtis Jones as well. And I think it's quite disappointing to see those players not have a start. Players who are trying to prove something in a game that Newcastle are up for. You need players that are really up for this game, and it didn't seem that was the case.
How much of a disappointment has this season been, Joe? Because this is a disappointing season now, isn't it?
I don't think it's a disappointing season. I think you'd say to any Liverpool fan, Arne Slot wins the league in his first season. It's an incredible season. And from where they are, where they've been halfway through this season, I can see why there's disappointment, because they did so well in the Champions League. Good cup run. Obviously, FA Cup was a disappointment. I think there is a right to feel a little bit of disappointment, particularly when it's 2 games in a row. But actually, I'm delighted with how this season's gone.
And I think it's really important to just end on the fact that very genuinely and I think a lot of neutral football fans are delighted for Newcastle. They're a big club that just haven't had the success that their fans deserve. They've been through
100%.
the Mike Ashley years for all that time, and obviously, we're not talking about the Saudi ownership here, but just those fans, they really deserved the day they had yesterday.
Yeah, and I think the ownership does need to come into it. Let's be real that has had an impact on the team, and there are a few questions around that. But from a purely footballing perspective, if we're going to speak in that terms, this is what you want to see. You want to see teams that aren't in the supposed top 6, wherever Newcastle are at the moment in that ranking. You want to see those teams winning these cups.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the Premier League. Man City drawing at home to Brighton, 2 each. What did you make of this one?
Yeah, so I think props to Brighton. This is their first point at the Etihad in 8 visits, and they're very much in the hunt for Champions League here after this point, with City remaining in touch. But I think it's just another disappointing result for Man City overall. I think they don't really look as good going forward still, and Pep's so known for having answers to problems, and it doesn't feel like he's solved the Rodri problem.
Well, this is it, and I wanted to touch on this. City took an early lead from the penalty spot. It was a penalty, so, deservedly so. Great equaliser for Brighton from Estupiñán. The free kick was fantastic, really well taken. Marmoush then put City 2-1 in front. And actually, great goal, but it was not very City-like. Now, hear me, what I mean is you don't see City scoring those kind of goals. It's usually well-worked, very methodical, Haaland prodding it in at the back post, whatever it is. But this was very much a player finding a bit of space 20 yards from goal and finishing really well.
Yeah, having a go.
Which actually isn't really like them. And I think that sort of speaks to the more chaotic, frenetic pace of things at the moment with City.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that Guardiola won't like to see.
Yeah.
City the last couple of seasons have been known for how they control games, and they almost suffocate opposition. Pep loves a 1-0 win.
Yeah.
And this is too chaotic for him, and I don't know what he needs to do to change that.
Let's have a look at Ipswich versus Forest. Ipswich at home in this one, losing 4-2 to Nottingham Forest. The scoreline suggests that this was quite an interesting game. And actually, it couldn't have been further from the truth, really. It was Forest looked absolutely dominant, I would say coasted to a sort of a first half 3-0 lead, and then were able to take their foot off the gas a bit.
Yeah, not so much a professional win, but they got 3 goals in 6 minutes in the first half to go 3-0 up, and from there they just kind of cruised, and they almost just thought, right, we've sealed this. Ipswich aren't going to come back from 3. Let's take our foot off the gas a bit and see it through. And still very much in there in the Champions League spaces.
And it feels a bit of a shame for Ipswich. This game sort of summed their season up. Looked like they had a bit of fight, scored a couple of goals, but ultimately just not good enough and conceding too many goals, really, I think.
And they still haven't won a game in 2025, and that's not going to set you up well for the end of the season, where they're almost certainly down now.
Yeah, it's sorry times at Portman Road. We're going to look at a few other games involving teams that are seemingly now prioritising other competitions.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a group of clubs that have nothing to play for in the league now. Let's start at Fulham, where Tottenham are the team in question here. Fulham are very much in the hunt for European places, but they beat Tottenham 2-0. A fantastic goal from Ryan Sessegnon, and I really like this story. Ryan Sessegnon came up through the Fulham ranks, really promising player, got that move to Tottenham that every promising player seems to get, and then their career go downhill. But he's come back to Fulham, starting to play a little bit more at left back, and he's got a couple of goals, and this was a good one.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Spurs looked sort of as they have done these last few months, not got that cutting edge, not controlling the game like they should be able to.
And again, they made quite a few changes for this team, which suggests they are prioritising Europe. They got this win over Alkmaar in the Europa League. So they didn't start Son, they didn't start James Maddison, they didn't start Van der Ven, and they just didn't seem at it for this game.
What do we think of Arsenal 1, Chelsea 0? Because on paper, this should have been the blockbuster, shouldn't it?
It should be, but so often with this game the last few seasons, it's been really dull. I think it's not really delivered recently, and again, this one, there was no real big chances in this game. The only goal came from a corner that kind of strange looped header past Sanchez, who made a bit of an error with the corner. But yeah, really uneventful game. I actually think this was a really important win for Arsenal. The title race isn't dead, but it's quite unlikely. But
it's not far off.
It's not far off. And there was a danger that if Arsenal didn't win again, which they haven't won in the league for a while, that Chelsea could have been 3 points behind them, Forest chasing them. They needed this win to solidify their Champions League place.
To solidify second place.
Yeah.
You know.
No, essentially.
Which is where Arsenal are at the moment. But I agree. I thought they dominated enough to feel like 1-0 was warranted. They were particularly good down the right-hand side. Chelsea struggled in that left-back position to stop players getting to the byline, and eventually Arsenal were going to break through. Sanchez in goal, at fault, wasn't he, again?
Yeah, he's not had a good season. Chelsea don't know what they're doing with their keepers this year. They've not settled on a number one, which I feel is quite important to do. Quite a few clubs have tried this two-keeper situation. Brighton have tried it in the past. Arsenal tried it with Ramsdale and Raya. You need to settle on a good number one because that is the basis of your defence. And if your defence doesn't have the relationship with your keeper, it's not going to work. So Chelsea need to sort that out this summer.
Certainly do. Bournemouth losing 2-1 at home to Brentford, Joe?
Yeah, really weird season for Brentford so far. They had the first half of the season, they were brilliant at home, scoring loads of goals. The entertainers of the Premier League, terrible away, and it's kind of swapped over.
Do you remember that there was that period where they kept scoring within the first 2 minutes?
There's like 3 games in a row where they scored in the first minute, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And
very, very bizarre.
it was just their thing. But yeah, they've now got 5 away wins in a row, Brentford, and looking good, very much mid-table, not threatened by relegation, not really pushing for Europe. They're coping well without Ivan Toney this season. He's almost been out of the conversation completely, hasn't he? And they're scoring goals. Vissa and Mbeumo looking great. Good win.
Good win. Bournemouth, are they stuttering a bit, running out of steam?
I think sadly, yes. Had a really good run earlier on in the season. They beat Man City, they beat Arsenal. They have had a few injuries and it's kind of catching up with them. They're still in the conversation for Europe, and I think it'd be nice to see them push towards that. But yeah, I do think they're running out of legs.
A good couple of games for Manchester United, winning 3-0 here away at Leicester.
Yeah, they've had a good week on the pitch. I'd suggest Jim Ratcliffe needs to come out more and criticise the team because it seems to have fired them up. 7 goals in 2 games, 2 convincing wins. This one was against Leicester though, Ed.
I do feel, as a Leicester fan, you've got to be frustrated because they've made the change in manager and you've got that kind of optimism of we could still get out of this. And it was an interesting sort of vaguely optimistic time for the first few games, and then it's just completely fell flat for them, hasn't it?
There was that first game against West Ham where they beat them and it was looking really optimistic. You know, they fired Cooper, they were out of the relegation zone. This was seen as quite a positive appointment, mainly because Ruud van Nistelrooy had already beaten Leicester twice in his interim charge at Manchester United. So they were like, oh, he knows how to beat us. Maybe he'll be a great manager for us. It's not happened.
He's continued to beat Leicester, apparently, but this time just in charge of them.
Yeah, I think this is just the story of the season for all 3 relegation clubs, really, isn't it?
We know the 3 that are going down, don't we?
It's going to take an absolute miracle, especially with Wolves winning this weekend. They've extended the gap to 9 points.
And it's not even like with Ipswich, at least they had a bit of something about them and they were kind of playing well, but all 3 of them have just looked like they've given up at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a shame. This is 2 seasons in a row now where all 3 promoted clubs have gone down. That's actually quite a rare occurrence, and it's showing the gap between the Premier League and the Championship, sadly. But yeah, I don't think there's any hope for any club to put together a run.
Can we touch on United? Because I think it would be a shame to sort of just gloss over a 3-0 away win, even against Leicester. Bruno Fernandes, just really, really good again, wasn't he?
Really good again. He got a hat-trick in midweek, and then in this game he got a goal and 2 assists. So he's really stepping up, actually. I think he's been criticised for the way he is a captain of this club, but he's really kind of dragging them through this period, putting together a run. I think really the story of this game, though, is Rasmus Højlund scored his first goal in 21 games, and he's been desperate for a goal, and he's got one.
Yeah, he's one of those players who looks useful, doesn't he? And we've all been there where we've had a striker at our club, and you think, oh yeah, they look like they could go on a run. Yeah. They look like they could, and then they just sort of never do. And so, he's had this goal drought, and listen, he's broken it. Fair play. Maybe he can push on.
He's one of those players that if you're a United fan, you're just willing him to score. I think you saw this in midweek. When you're comfortably winning, the thing that's going to top off the win is a Højlund goal. That didn't happen in midweek, so I think it's really good that he got the first in this game.
There's also been loads of other chat about Man United this week,
Yes.
as we touched on. So this was last Tuesday, that on the day that we released last week's podcast, we were all ready to go with the podcast, and then this news of this new stadium broke. And so we've had a week to digest it, Joe. What are your initial thoughts about the new Man United stadium, the new Old Trafford? New Trafford, yeah.
It's a bit funny, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that it, all of the sort of, it looks like a circus big top and all that.
Yeah, it looks like Spring Harvest Minehead. I think the whole thing for me, I mean, that couple of days was just a bit of a roller coaster, wasn't it? I think that interview with Jim Ratcliffe, I think it's a questionable decision. I have my opinions on Gary Neville as a pundit, but I think he did really well in this interview. I think he asked some good questions. He held him to account as an ownership. There was that bit where Jim Ratcliffe was saying we had to stop giving ex-players money, and Gary Neville suggested send a player to a charity dinner to raise funds, and Jim Ratcliffe was like, didn't think of that. And you just see that and you're like, oh, how's Gary Neville come up with that and your team of people haven't? So he's doing all this chat of the club has no money. By November, we will run out of cash if I don't inject £300 million and make all these costs. Then the next day, you release these images of a however many £billion stadium, and you're just like, this isn't adding up.
What I would say, and I'm going to come to the defence of Jim Ratcliffe here,
Okay.
which is not what I was expecting to do at the start of it, but what I would say is it's very much along the lines of what we were chatting about with Stephen Illingworth in the last episode, is that actually we're talking about such big, vast sums of money that the actual physical cash isn't sitting anywhere. It's all done on credit and loans and are you good for this loan and all that sort of stuff. Now, United are in extraordinary amounts of debt, so they're going to need to take on a loan to build this. But as we have seen with Tottenham, building that stadium does lead to massive amounts more of increased revenue. So it's a good long-term strategy. And that basically, as Jim said, is like we need to cut corners so that we can show any would-be creditors that we are a stable business. They're putting the foundations in the right place, and that's what the banks are going to want to know, one would imagine. So that's them just doing the be trusted with little, and then you'll be trusted with more. There's a larger chat here about stadiums as well, Joe, and I wonder if maybe we should look at this another time in more detail, because there's a few clubs now who are moving from quite historic stadiums, aren't there? And there's a lot of discussion about, well, what are you going to do with Old Trafford? By the sounds of it, they're just going to bulldoze it, which feels, I'm not a Man United fan, but I know the history that's in that place.
It feels quite sad, I think. And I think Old Trafford needs work. It's been well documented that it's kind of falling apart. There's leaks everywhere, both metaphorical leaks and actual leaks from the dressing room. And I think you have a decision whether to redevelop a stadium or to build a complete new one. Now, I think most multimillionaire owners probably like the idea of building a new one, making it bigger. He wants to make this a 100,000-seater stadium.
And there's a legacy thing there as well, isn't there?
Of course. Liverpool had this decision to make a few years ago, and they decided to develop the Anfield Road end and the main stand. And I'm really grateful that they did, because there's a history there.
The Bible's got a lot of wisdom on this, but it doesn't really come down either way on it. If you look at a verse, for example, like the one in Proverbs 22, that says, do not move the ancient boundary stones that your ancestors set. And there's many other verses that are very similar to that basically say, this is where something very important happened in the past, and you should respect that and remember that and don't just throw it away. Equally, if you look at a verse, for example, like this one in Isaiah 43, it says, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Again, different context. We're not talking about football stadiums here, but that verse is very much saying, like, look, let's move on to a new thing. And there is a new thing happening over here. Yes, you can remember your history, but at the end of the day, it's just a building. It's just a stadium. I think we should definitely have a look at this in a future episode, Joe, and to delve into more detail.
Let's do that.
About stadiums.
So, Ed, we've reached another international break,
Oh,
much
and
needed.
This is what we all want, is more international breaks. You're delighted,
Yeah,
aren't you?
I'm actually quite grateful for it, which I never thought I would say. But this is Thomas Tuchel's first international break as England manager, and with that, his first squad announcement. Now, let's just quickly speak about a few notable inclusions and exclusions with this squad before we have a deeper chat about this, shall we? So, I think some notable inclusions is Marcus Rashford is back.
Yeah, very much so. I would say a man in form, isn't he? It's early days yet at Villa, but it's really, really promising signs. So
0 goals in 9 games, so very much back. Another potentially questionable inclusion maybe is Jordan Henderson is back in the England squad. What do you think about that?
Well, he very much seemed like his England career was over, didn't it? He went to Saudi Arabia and it didn't kind of work out there, but he's ended up going to Ajax, which again felt like quite a good move, I think.
Yeah,
probably.
I think so.
And it's fair to say, not really kept an eye on how he's doing over there, but he must be doing well. He's wearing the captain's armband, Joe.
I wouldn't say he's set the Dutch Eredivisie alight.
Okay.
And I think anyone decent enough might be able to do that. But he's played 2 games in 9, so he's not playing regularly. But I think this is definitely one of those that Thomas Tuchel wants a bit of experience in there. He's a former captain of a Premier League team. He has captained England in the past as well. Another player that's been included, Ed, is Kyle Walker.
Yeah, and obviously he's out at AC Milan, but very much the chat a few months ago, I would say, was about how Kyle Walker was past it at this level.
Yeah.
Now, I know his inclusion in the England squad has been much more recent, but it felt to me again like Jordan Henderson. I was pretty convinced he might get in a few fringe squads here and there, but generally speaking, for first qualifiers, I was very surprised to see this.
Yeah, me too. And I wonder with Kyle Walker, there is also that lack of fit right back for England. He's traditionally been the go-to right back. He has fallen away a bit. Trent Alexander-Arnold played a little bit under Lee Carsley, but he's injured. They've also brought Livramento and Reece James, which you would think one of those would start over Kyle Walker, but very much a dressing room inclusion.
Dan Burn got his first
Do we have to talk about him again?
We do, Dan Burn. That's pretty good. To find yourself getting your first England cap at 32.
Yeah. I feel like this is a little bit of a Lewis Dunk situation for me. That kind of
Is he only going to get one cap?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one of those caps that you're like, oh, you're probably not going to start, but you're having a good season. Let's give you a go.
Gotcha. Can we talk about notable omissions, Joe?
Yes, let's do that.
Now, the big one for me, which has sort of been rectified in the last few days, was Morgan Gibbs-White. He was omitted from the initial squad, but due to Cole Palmer being injured, he's now found himself been drafted back in, hasn't he? That feels right that he's in that squad, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those now where it's like, oh, now you want me. It's mad that he wasn't included. Clearly he was on the fringes, it was touch and go, so he'll be glad that he has now been included.
Other notable absentees, Jack Grealish, is that notable? He hasn't been doing very well. That feels about right. Ollie Watkins, I think, is unlucky not to.
That's an interesting
not
one,
to get
actually.
He had a bit of a drought when Villa weren't playing well a few months ago, but has started to score again recently. But for Dominic Solanke to get in at the expense of Ollie Watkins,
that's
that
the
doesn't feel
interesting
right.
one. He's not particularly set the world alight this season.
One of the main themes of this squad, though, and I think some people would see this as a good thing, some as a bad thing, but one of the main themes is players who we thought were past it have been brought back in. This idea of you're never too old to bring something to the party, to bring your experience, to bring your wisdom. Maybe that's what Tuchel is thinking, is let's take some experience over youthful volatility. Let's get a few decent results in the bank before we start experimenting. But what are your thoughts on bringing in these older players, do you think?
Well, I think for some reason age is such a big conversation in football and in sport, really. I was reading a match report of the Fulham game, and Willian started his first game back at Fulham, and they lead with 36-year-old Willian.
Yeah.
So this is such a big...
Which is like he's the oldest player in the world, And let me tell you, as somebody who is 36, I am very, very offended by that.
Do you think you could do a job on the wing at Fulham?
I could do a job on the wing at Fulham, cutting inside. Yeah,
I reckon you could bend one to the back post.
Definitely couldn't. But no, I get what you mean. It's upper and lower, isn't it? So you get the same thing,
16-year-old Lamine Yamal.
Exactly. It's all about how old you are and whether that means that you're worthy of actually bringing something to the table. It's a really interesting point you make, is because I think that in so many ways, age actually doesn't make much of a difference at all. We all know older players who just are not leaders at all. Equally, there are some fantastic younger players who exhibit the personality traits of players much older than them. I think about Jude Bellingham. When Kane missed the penalty in the World Cup, and the first person to run up to him was Jude Bellingham and look him in the eyes and say, "It's okay, we've got this." You saw this young leader who looked years older than he actually was, just demonstrating a future England captain status in that moment. And so you sort of have this situation where actually a player's age, it doesn't matter. Surely it's just about the personality. And so maybe we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions with Jordan Henderson and Kyle Walker.
But I think the interesting thing here is that they have been brought in for that experience, and these are two former captains that clearly are there to bring that. But you don't necessarily have that many young players. I think what I'd like to see is bring those two, but also let's bring Adam Wharton, let's bring Liam Delap, these kind of players that can learn from that experience. And I think this is kind of the conversation we're going to have from here, is that the value of adding experience and those people that have been through life, different seasons in their life, and how that can speak into our own life.
Yeah. Now, Joe, I've got a question for you. Do you feel old or young in your workplace?
I feel quite young. I'm still just about clinging on to my 20s.
Yeah, because I remember, for example, when I came here to UCB, I felt like one of the younger members of staff. Now, I've been here for a few years, not loads, but UCB has hired a lot more younger people in that time that I've been here. So all of a sudden, just in the space of a few years, I've gone from feeling like one of the youngsters to now feeling like one of the elder.
And it shows.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so I'm regularly working with people like yourself and other presenters and other producers who are in their 20s and just feel a bit out of the conversation.
When we're talking about TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to chime in with something you've seen on Facebook.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm like, do you remember MySpace? And, but I think there's definitely something where it's very easy to feel like the world has sort of passed you by, and very easy to feel like you have nothing to offer. What do you think in terms of like the idea that somebody who's maybe a bit older still has something to bring to the table?
I think it's a really valuable thing that we have, both here and as Christians. I recently moved churches a few years ago, and something that me and my wife were looking at was a community that is representative of the area that we live in. And I think a big part of that representation was age. And I think we saw real value in surrounding ourselves with people of different ages. And I think something that we've found really valuable is having that kind of input from people that are older than you, that have been through a life stage that you're about to enter.
A bit of a mentorship thing.
100%. Because I think this is something I think about often. And I think we take it for granted a little bit. I think of some friends that I have that don't go to church, don't have a faith. In what scenario are they able to learn from people that are older than them? If they don't have that at work, where do they have that? They're kind of doing it on their own, and I think it's something we really take for granted, this kind of access to people of all ages.
Yeah, and I think so too. I remember when I was in my mid-20s and I was struggling with my career and just having one of those sort of moments in life where I felt directionless, I felt rudderless. And I remember having an amazing conversation with my small group leader, and he was just a bit older than me. And he just sat me down and just helped me see the bigger picture. And he basically, in a nutshell, was like, none of us have got it together. We're all just sort of trying. And I'll always remember that conversation because it really helped to ground me in the sense of, oh, you know what? It's going to be fine because I'm walking with Jesus and I'm, and we'll get there.
I think also an important thing to recognize here is that all throughout the Bible, God used people of all ages to do his work, right? Like he didn't just use those mid-20s, sprightly, innocent.
The cool ones.
He didn't use the cool ones. Noah was old when God asked him to build the ark.
Yeah.
And that's one of the first things in the Bible, right? That God used him in that way. So, yeah, your age shouldn't stop what God is going to do with you.
100%. And actually looking to the Bible, there are scriptures that say, don't hold back your voice just because you're young. Like, if you have something to bring, go and bring it. Equally, there's this verse in Job that just says, those who are older should speak because wisdom comes with age. So I think it's very much a point that, for me, what the Bible says is that your age is not a defining factor, but actually your personality, your temperament, and your character, it has a much bigger impact on how useful you can be in a particular situation or a community.
It says in Proverbs that iron sharpens iron. It doesn't put an age to that, does it? It just says iron sharpens iron. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can learn from people that are more experienced from you. You can also learn from younger people. We often have this kind of thought that we want this childlike faith, and I think you often look to younger generations as to how they have that almost innocent faith, and we can learn from that too.
So what you're saying is there's hope for me yet, Joe?
I'd say so.
I've still got something to give.
Still got a few years left.
Okay, Joe, it's time for Bible Ballers again.
Oh gosh, this is a hard one.
It is a very difficult one, this one, isn't it?
Let me just get my Bible up.
Yeah. So Anthony has brought us a message with this week's Bible Ballers question because we're both being quizzed this week.
Hey guys, here's that question one more time. Which England under-20 international, who is also eligible to play for Jamaica and currently plays on loan in League One, has not one but 2 books of the Bible in their full name?
That is so difficult.
Really hard.
That is so difficult.
Oh my gosh.
I've got to be honest, I'm guessing Bible names. Now, Anthony has sent us a clue.
Okay.
Should we have a listen to the clue?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because we really need it, don't we?
Well, I know this has been a tough one, so here's a clue to help you get the book of the Bible. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Oh, this is terrible because it is, again, testing our Bible knowledge.
I know that, but I know that verse.
We all know it.
No,
We
I know
just-
where it's from.
Oh, come on, I don't. Where is that?
Well, if we're purely looking at Bible books, a player you can make is Daniel James. But he's not in League One. He's not Jamaican.
Yeah. Okay, we're just going to have to write some names, aren't we, and see if we can get a point.
I've got an answer.
I've got an answer, but it's not good. I've gone for Samuel Isaiah Jones. I am literally at this point just right.
Is
But
that a player?
I feel like I've heard like an Isaiah something.
Isaiah, yeah.
Do you know what I
could be
mean?
right.
Like a double barrel name. But this is League One players here. So at this point, I am just...
This is a hard one.
Okay, so what have you gone for?
If it wasn't the 2 books of the Bible, I would be confident on this book. Okay, I've gone for Micah Hamilton. So that verse is from Micah 6:8. He used to play for City, who Paul supports, who sent in the question. He's played for England under 20s, I believe. It could be feasible that he's gone on loan from Man City to a League One team.
Okay.
Not sure about the Jamaica thing. I'll hope that Micah Hamilton's middle name is Isaiah. Micah Isaiah Hamilton.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to lock in.
Okay, good. Should we have a listen? We have the answer right here.
The correct answer to this week's Bible Ballers is Micah Philippe Jude Hamilton.
Oh!
He's a former Man City youth player, and he's now at Stockport County on loan from Middlesbrough and has played for both England under 16s and under 20s. A fun fact about him is that he was also a ball boy for Man City while he was a youth player there, and during one game in 2017, he was filmed receiving instructions from Pep Guardiola himself on how to retrieve the ball for his team.
Oh, that was him.
Oh, do I get a point for that then?
You get 2 points.
2
for that.
points.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
You should be made up.
Absolutely delighted.
That is. I'm in the presence of Bible Ballers greatness. That was superb.
That clue helped massively.
Can I just say, what a question from Paul.
Oh, fantastic. And
We love that.
if you are listening and you have a question you'd like to send us, let's do this again.
Because that was great, wasn't it?
Yes, please.
Please send us an email, podcasts@ucb.co.uk, but put Bible Ballers in the subject of the email, and that way me and Joe just won't read it and Anthony will read it instead. Well, listen, Joe, that's all we've got time for this week.
Oh.
We'll have to chat more about Liverpool losing the Carabao Cup next week.
I think we're done. I think we're done with that conversation
for another year. Well, thank you for listening to The Big Man Up Top. If you want to get in touch with the show, ping us an email, podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, give us good reviews, all that lovely stuff. And if you've enjoyed this, please tell your mates. Also, a massive thank you to Anthony for all his hard work behind the scenes. And there will be a new episode next Tuesday. See you next week, Joe.
See you then, Ed.